Hello and welcome to episode 12 of our weekly podcast, Long Shots, where our aim is to fundamentally deconstruct the latest and greatest from the world of business and finance. Just to let our listeners know, we are also streaming on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Deezer, and Spotify. So do subscribe and check our channel. This is Nikhil Arora, and I have with me Sharad Tupran.
Hi Nikhil, how are you? And it's good to be here as always.
Yes, sir. No, the pleasure is all mine. It has been a good run so far.
Yeah, can't complain. This is our 12th episode and it doesn't feel like we've hit almost 3 months now.
Yes, man. Time just flies, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, speaking of time, this week has been pretty eventful. A lot of moving parts. I think the week before with the festive season was fairly quiet, at least on the domestic front. But this week has all the ingredients of drama, politics, both within India and outside.
Yeah, and elections ongoing adds another spin in this dynamic landscape.
Yeah, definitely. So let's start with the way the week started, right? I mean, let's start with Monday. Monday was pretty significant. 19 November, RBI board met.
Yeah.
We discussed that last week,
Yeah.
how that board meeting really would have a significant role in defining the dynamic between the government and the central bank. What were the? Do you want to go with the high level points there? What exactly happened?
Let's talk about it. And I think the one thing that we didn't expect was, or well, somewhat loosely expected, I guess, but it took them 9 hours.
Yes, it was a 9-hour meeting.
Yeah. So let's try to abridge that takeaways of that 9 hour into, let's call it, a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
But I mean, at its at its core, there are probably 4 key takeaways in terms of how they're viewing at things. So let's just go over them one by one, and let's start with obviously the most topical one and something that we touched upon last time as well on surplus reserves and how much of those surplus reserves does the government warrant from the RBI, or who decides what is surplus, or should they even have a say along those lines. So what is the key takeaway, and what consensus view has emerged out of it?
So before I go there, I would like to let our listeners know that do check out episode 11, where we I think do a fairly deep dive on what exactly is the entire discussion around surplus all about, right? So it's regarding the economic capital framework of the RBI. And the main idea is that, once RBI has made its income, it's done with all its expenses, it dividends out whatever is remaining to the government, and it keeps a contingency liability or reserve, right? So how much of that should they be allowed to keep, and how much of that should they actually send to the government?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, and it's been a very tricky question, because RBI obviously says that they have to take care of things like financial resilience and macroeconomic shocks, which are fairly difficult to quantify and predict, so to say. And the government obviously would like to have more cash in their kitty. I think so. It's basically a typical case of funds from monetary policy to move towards fiscal policy.
Yeah,
and I think there was some level of consensus. From an administrative point of view, whenever they say that, let's ask a committee to decide, it's usually a tactic to, I think, buy time, transition out. So that's what happened, right? So they decided that, let's have a committee created between the government and RBI, who can build some sort of a framework around ECF.
Yeah. No, I always get a little edgy. I mean, not in this context generally, but I always get a little edgy when there's a big meeting, high-profile meeting, and a big takeaway from that appears to be that they formed a committee to address the entire premise of what that meeting was initially laid out for.
Yes.
I'd love to see some research on number of committees in India. I'm sure there are tons of committees doing different things.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, have you watched that TV show, comedy show, Yes Minister? Yes, Prime Minister, the British one.
No.
So there, the running joke was that I think it was Sir Humphrey, who was the main secretary in the government. So his biggest tactic always was like, sir, let's create an interdepartmental committee.
Yeah.
That was like a way to stall what would come out.
Yeah.
So obviously there are traces of that. But the interesting thing is this committee will be a joint committee. So
that sort of a jokey comment, but yes, there is a committee and they've decided to coordinate their decision-making process on how to sort of distribute or think about what is surplus, correct?
Yeah. But the thing is that, like right now, if you look at the RBI, if you look at their internal view, they are not ready to commit to a formula, to calculate how much surplus they should keep and how much of it should be released to the government. And this committee is supposed to crack that. And I was reading, suddenly there were these weird questions that, okay, should the RBI have a credit rating, and based on its credit, its quality of credit,
Yeah.
we can decide upon what the surplus is. But then the question is that shouldn't the RBI's credit be similar to sovereign credit?
Government, yeah.
But the RBI says no, our credit is better than the credit of government of India.
Yeah.
And so, that, I mean, it's not an easy question to resolve.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult, I think, put a set framework that let's take this number and it should be a percentage of this number.
Correct.
So yeah, I think it will be more of a kind of a qualitative checklist.
Yeah.
Of events or things which will drive.
Yeah, no, I can see that, and let's see. I mean, what this committee, or if there is any more granularity. But as of now, I think it's a step forward, if you will.
Yeah.
And so that was one, and let's move to one of the other key takeaways. And I think we were talking about it as well downstairs, but sort of prompt corrective action.
Yeah.
And how to think about it in terms of distressed banks, let's call it, distressed financial institutions, and what kind of restrictions should be deployed on them. Do they require further easing, or do they need to get tightened? So there again, there have been some takeaways, and do you want to walk us through what the takeaways were?
Sure, yeah. So the PCA is basically, its prompt corrective action framework is an RBI instituted thing, which basically says that if there's a bank whose capital ratio is below 9%, and whose NPAs have gone above 10%, then it comes under PCA, and that means that they will have some severe restrictions on how much dividend they can distribute, how much lending they can do, right? So 11 or 12 banks are part of the PCA framework. I think out of that 11 are public sector banks, and the government has been saying that look, these banks have frankly improved their financial performance in the last couple of quarters.
Yeah.
So you might as well review this list and get them out of it so that they can start lending more. Government obviously has another interest in that, because if the bank is outside PCA, then the government doesn't have to capitalize it to the extent that it required to do earlier.
What's the current net NPA ratio requirement? Like 9, 10?
I think it's 10%.
10%?
Yeah. The result of the board meeting was that I think another committee has been created. I mean, not really committee, like this decision has now been outsourced to the Board for Financial Supervision, which is a body within the RBI.
Yeah.
It is headed by the RBI governor, and one of the deputy governors acts as its vice chairman. So they are supposed to decide whether the PCA framework needs to be revised and the list of 12 can be cut down. So let's see. So still kind of a work in progress there.
Yeah.
I think the third thing that was discussed, that was specifically on MSMEs,
Yeah.
that outcome was fairly definite. So in that, the RBI was pretty clear, saying that, okay, distressed MSMEs, any loan below 25 crores, that can be restructured. So that was one, I would say, definite check which came.
Yeah. So that's like basically easing of lending reforms, right? And for MSMEs, that's probably good for businesses, including ourselves.
I mean, I don't think we have access to the banking sector as of now, Sharad. I love your optimism, but yeah. I think it's easy. It's kind of it's a good. It's something that was required from the government's perspective. So I think the RBI gave some room.
Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of a blend of compromise and stubbornness, which was kind of seen. But I think the good thing is that at least there was a communication which was happening finally between the two institutions. Earlier, it was pretty juvenile. They were just giving independent speeches and tweets. And the last was, I think there was some easing on the capital norms for banks overall.
Again, sort of easing lending, right? I mean, at its crux.
Yeah, at its crux, yeah. So there's I don't want to go too much into bank capital, but there's a bare minimum capital ratio which has to be maintained at 9% plus, and then there are buffers on top which have to be kept. So those buffers and the ratio was due to be increased, but now I think the RBI has given time till March 2020 to give more time to the banking sector.
Yeah.
Right? So I mean, credit has been suffering in the last couple of quarters because of this entire NPA issue.
Yeah.
So the government obviously wants the RBI to cut the banks a bit of slack. So I think that conclusion came out.
Yeah. No, it's good. I think meaningful, I guess, if something that we were tracking as well, and we've discussed at length about government and RBI and whatnot, and how much should they collaborate and how much are they independent.
Right.
So this sort of leaning towards more a collaborative environment, which I think I'm okay with that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a positive step. I mean, as I was saying last time, the RBI, no matter how autonomous it is accountable to the government. So if the government is asking a question, that conversation needs to be had. You just cannot, shun away away yourself in a room and throw a tantrum. You need to talk about it. So I think that has happened, which is a good mature measure. A bit late, but yeah.
Yeah, no, of course. If you have a say in who the CEO of the banks is going to be,
Yeah.
you might as well account yourself to the government as well.
Yeah.
You
So I
can't-
mean, I think both of them could have kind of dealt with this situation in a better way. But I was never against the fundamental premise of asking these questions.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, that was I think a fairly okay thing to happen. Otherwise, I think moving a bit away from the nuances of central banking
Yeah.
and finance. What about tech? A lot of tech and media. A lot of things are going on there, Sharad, right?
Yeah, I mean, like I've always maintained that we're living in one of the most dynamic media environments,
Right.
and it's exciting. Like literally every week there's something new that happens, and which meets the eye. And we've seen some heavyweight media transaction recently, Disney Fox being a big one. But
Right.
yesterday was interesting because mainstream news media, Western albeit, were reporting that Amazon is bidding on 22 regional sports networks, which Fox has.
Right.
And the nuance around it is that Disney bought Fox for about 72 billion US.
Right.
But the transaction as such required Disney to offload 22 of Fox's live sports assets, just because Justice Department believes that, because Disney already owns ESPN, so Justice Department believes that that's too much of a monopolistic
From a
leaning
competition perspective.
exactly, from a competition centric standpoint. So basically there are these assets, 22 regional Fox Sports live sports assets, which are up there for sale. So it's a matter of who gets them, who bids for them the highest. Now what is interesting is, amongst a bunch of private equity players like the KKR and Blackstone and whatnot, but Amazon is also appears to be interested in these assets.
Right.
So like we talked about, it's interesting how essentially Amazon does everything to build its Prime membership more robust and improve upon it. So clearly they see live sports as one of the pieces. So it's a very interesting angle.
Why is that? Why is live sports so interesting?
Yeah, it's interesting because sports content as such has not been really cracked by any of these SWOT players. I mean, Hotstar is somewhat of an exception, but also the other things. It's unscripted, right? So it's a different kind of media proposition from other, let's call it, TV shows and programming that we are used to. And second of all is because it's got a very short shelf life, it still has to be viewed in an appointment viewing kind of setup because it's live. And that generally drives huge swings in traffic, which can be monetized by advertising. So there's a different skill set, there's a different strategic nuance that live sports brings from, let's call it, other time sensitive pieces of content. So that's why it's one of those much debated topics, why Netflix doesn't do live sports, or why Hotstar is so good because of live sports, or why is Amazon wondering about live sports. Even we've seen guys like Facebook also try to bid for sporting rights, and they distribute La Liga football in India. So these are all, live sports is quickly emerging to be a very important subject of debate when you talk about media delivery
But
platforms.
like philosophically, it's it kind of comes across as different from the way these OTT players are actually monetizing.
Yeah, it does. At the end of the day, when it comes to Amazon, at least, I guess they will just try to make their Prime membership more robust. I don't know how much of a role advertising as such will play, but it's still
But I
owning.
think, anyways, when you look at like advertising in sports, it's such a natural fit. I mean, as a viewer, one also doesn't mind.
Correct, because there's just so many stoppages in play.
Yeah, so Amazon Prime, kind of going into conjecture, but might as well have a dual monetization tactic playing on there, right? They look at Prime as a subscription play, but they might have advertising within the sports. Who knows, right? It's not written in stone.
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. And I'd say from an Indian context, I really like to read through, like establish read-throughs into the Indian context. And Hotstar is obviously one of our sports-centric.
They pretty much took the lead on this, right?
Yeah, they did, and that's courtesy Star India ownership, who was successful in getting rights for EPL and for Wimbledon and Formula One and IPL of the big one, and BCCI cricket rights for home series. All these things have helped Hotstar really to leverage the content ownership that Star India has got.
Right.
But I feel it'll be interesting to see if guys like Amazon and maybe Facebook and maybe even Google via YouTube or Apple or whoever, all the tech guys start to push harder into the Indian sporting rights, it could easily drive up the price of content rights for
Right.
at least for a Hotstar, let's say, or a Star India, if you will. And I think it impacts Hotstar's risk profile negatively, if anything, if the tech giants start coming into this sphere. And
In that way, like Hotstar is also different because I think in India, that way traditional media is ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Because here you have Star TV, I mean, Star India, Star Sports, very traditional in terms of, distribution. They create a OTT platform, Hotstar, who kind of leverages on their own content.
Yeah.
Right? They took a very digital approach towards that problem. And now with Amazon probably coming in, much deeper pockets, they'll get nervous, right?
Yeah.
Like now,
Yeah,
the real guys are going to get into this.
yeah, who already have massive advantages from the distribution side. So it's leveraging the distribution scale of distribution and exploit those synergies, I guess.
Because I think Star paid a lot for the latest IPL
Yeah,
rights,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And probably once they expire,
Which is 2022.
2022, right? So all these guys, and Facebook was a part of that
Correct.
process as well,
Yeah,
right? I
yeah.
think they only bid for. I think one of the reasons why Star won, if I recall, is because they gave a very holistic bid.
Exactly. They
Covered
got
all-
global rights.
Yeah.
And paid the maximum for global rights. I think that's the reason they got it. So it's no guarantee that they'll continue to get it.
Right.
So let's see how that goes. And
Right.
what is another interesting angle in this is that Hotstar is owned by Star India, which is owned by Fox, and Fox just got out by Disney. So there is a Disney play here now. So Disney is basically going to be making inroads into the Indian markets via Hotstar, and they already have ESPN. So let's see. I mean, there are definitely multiple things happening. So if Amazon starts to bid for IPL rights in India, it's not going up against Hotstar or Star India. It's going up against Disney. It's still an American firm battle which will take place here. So let's see. It'll be very interesting and definitely worth keeping an eye out for when it comes to sports rights and media content rights anyway.
Yeah. I mean, media-wise, I was reading, I mean, when it comes to content ownership, this kind of new approach is being taken by so many players, right? Even Apple, if I recall, they did a transaction as well in this, right? I mean, they I think, what was it? Movie Studio A24?
Yeah, I think that's they bought it, right?
So, yeah, it's a original programming play there as well, I guess.
Yeah, and one thing interesting to keep an eye on with that transaction is they're going to get into movies as well. And I'm very curious to see if they do it on theater. Will they be available on theaters or will they not be? That will be, because if they are in a theater, then they just become a proper production studio.
Right.
But if they're going to use that content just for their own Apple membership, then it's a different play.
I think, I mean, Apple is traditionally a very ecosystem focused player, right?
Yeah.
I was lately listening to this podcast. I think it was the guy is Marcus Brown. I don't know if I'm saying the name correctly. I mean, he's a big tech commentator, right?
Okay.
So he was telling about how Apple would always do compromises on their product design if they feel it looks better and if they feel it kind of ties better with their own ecosystem.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure if Apple goes into full on original programming, they would probably make sure that on your iPhones, on your iPads, on your Macs, that kind of becomes an exclusive content stream that you get while being part of it. Because I mean, when it comes to this company, I don't think they're winning the battle of devices anymore.
Yeah.
They are winning the battle of OS. And they're winning the battle of the software and the offering, right? Which people are so clued on. So probably content is just another add-on. Yeah. That.
No, that's I can agree with that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And definitely media landscape has rapidly been encroached by the tech guys.
Yeah.
Like, there is no debate about it.
Yeah.
How it unfolds is what matters, I guess.
Because I mean, for Apple's case, just to add on that, apparently the biggest motivator for iPhone users is iMessage and FaceTime, which are completely proprietary Apple to Apple, features.
Yeah.
And who knows, they might be like, if you're on Apple to Apple, you can exchange movies. Who knows, they can kind of, do all those kind of funky things to make sure that you are locked onto their system, right?
Yeah, I think in the last Facebook's earnings call, Mark Zuckerberg said that the biggest competitor he sees to Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp is iMessage.
Right.
So he was speaking very highly of iMessage and how he sees that as a real threat to their business.
I mean, we don't see that in India that much, but I think in the US, in West, it's pretty common, if you get a text message if instead of getting iMessage blue message, you get a green message,
Yeah.
people get put off. They're like,
Yeah.
oh man, I mean, that means I have to pay something for a, so that kind of, that ecosystem is fairly real.
Yeah. No, it's definitely interesting. And now that we've talked about two very diverse issues, let's touch base on our last one, which you have a personal
Not really personal, but yeah, I'm obviously kind of from an academic perspective, I would
Interested in
say interested in it because I lived there, I guess.
Yeah, so let's talk about Brexit, and there are obviously some noise around it and going forward with it, but there are a lot of things that still need to be worked out before it becomes a smoother exit, I guess.
Yeah, no, it was a big. I think it was the week before when Brexit kind of came back in the limelight. A very topical theme, extremely boring though, the way it is kind of transpiring. As you know that after the vote, it's been almost now more than I think 1.5, 2 years. Now, finally, Theresa May, she presented a draft Brexit agreement and got it approved by the cabinet, and technically moving the battle away from the government to the parliament for approval. So now the draft deal needs to be approved by the British Parliament, and obviously it needs to be approved by the European Union 27 member states. But from what it seems, the bigger roadblock is the domestic approval rather than the EU-wide approval. And I think it's a fairly geopolitically themed topic. So probably best not to go too much into the political side of things. From an economic perspective, the biggest takeaway for me was the position of London post Brexit, because currently London is a major financial center, I think in line with New York or Singapore in Asia. And one of the big reasons that it is because it has easy access to the rest of Europe. There's something called EU passporting when you're part of the European Union that allows you, if you are a financial advisor, say in Netherlands or in Glasgow, and you need to advise a French client somewhere else in Europe, you're free to do so. But if you're not part of the European Union, then you don't come under EU passporting. And I think the Brexit deal pretty much then will put London in the same position as New York or Tokyo, right? Rather than as a part of European Union from the perspective of access, right? So that means that banks would require individual, licenses, would require more paperwork in order to get access to the European financial markets. That I think is a big economic takeaway.
Yeah,
for sure.
No, it's interesting. As like you said, it's called equivalence, right? I mean,
So the new post-Brexit paradigm is called the equivalence. The one they had earlier was the EU passporting. So equivalence is pretty much like what EU would offer to
any other non-EU state, right?
Exactly. So that I think is because at the end of the day in UK, unlike France or Germany, where manufacturing and industry is a core offering and a core part of the economy, for UK financial services pretty much sums it up, right? So it's a big
it's the biggest moving piece in the economy. I get that. And what is because I was reading as well, and what is the nuance between Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland, and how that impacts this potential plan? Because there's a backstop plan that you...
Right. So the background is that, as you know, Republic of Ireland is a independent country.
Correct.
It's an EU member state, and Northern Ireland is part of United Kingdom.
Is it also part of Great Britain?
Interesting question. Great Britain is actually the island. The Britain, I won't say Great Britain, sorry. my colonial hangover just pulled me out, right? So Britain is basically the biggest island in UK, right? So it excludes Northern Ireland. It's basically Scotland, Wales and England, right? And United Kingdom would include Northern Ireland as well. So so Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland, as we all know from history, they had a tortuous past. So basically UK doesn't want to have a hard border between Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland. And when UK was part of the EU, that was not a problem, because then you were part of what is called the customs union, right? So there's no hard border between the EU countries. But now that it's withdrawing from the EU, a hard border might come in place as soon as the custom union get cancelled. So that's why there's something called the backstop plan, which pretty much says that UK will continue to be a part of the customs union in case a trade deal is not finalized by the end of the Brexit transition period. So the hardcore Brexiters are like, okay, then what's the point, right? I mean, if we continue to be in the customs union
That
without having any say.
Yeah, that defeats the entire principle or premise of the argument in the first place, right?
Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much the biggest bone of contention here.
Yeah, no, that's pretty interesting. So, what are the next steps then? Like, it's just chalking the plan out further and wait for the parliament to push it through.
It's I think a 600-page document,
Yeah.
580-page or something, and
And Theresa May doesn't have majority.
she does not have majority in the lower house exactly. So she needs to pass it through the house. I think by December this year.
Yeah.
And then it would go to the European Union. There's an EU summit on November 25th. Where I think the draft would also be presented just to, get the initial noise around it.
Yeah.
But, from what I have been reading, it's not an easy, straightforward route. So, because I think a lot of the support, a lot of people in the government, like the Brexit secretary himself, he resigned the very next day.
Yeah.
Right, when the Brexit plan came. Because they are kind of stuck between, giving out too much or, too little. And to be frank, I think nobody knows in what form or shape this would come out.
Yeah.
It's a very important political, I would say, event, but yeah, it's going in the most status quo-est, slow manner ever.
Yeah.
So it's a very British way in the way it's going on. I mean,
with a cup of tea.
With a cup of tea, yeah, it's very kind of, I mean, I remember like when it's just a personal anecdote, when I was in London, I remember during the Olympics, everyone was, all the time complaining about, the Olympics is about to start, so the metro basically there would be so full, and the world is about to end. Why are so many people coming in our city? And I felt, I mean, come on, if such a big event is happening in your city, you might as well be very happy about it, right? And there was so much introspection and discussion around it, and warnings were being given in advance. When the Olympics actually happened, trains were empty. Nobody was traveling in it during the peak rush time. Yeah. So yeah, I think in Britain they have a habit of kind of exaggerating or preparing for the worst. So yeah.
Yeah, no, should be interesting to track.
Totally based on stereotypes and anecdotal evidence here, obviously.
Nothing wrong with that. Like, stereotypes exist for a reason, I guess.
Yes.
And no, this has been a good chat, and I guess we can closely look at the British pound sterling as well. I think it will trade very heavily as we go into as we get closer to December. I remember when Brexit was first sort of got the memorandum, it sort of fell off so hardly.
Yes.
So hard.
So did my savings as well.
Yeah, I can see that. Anyway, this has been a really good chat, and I think, is there anything else that you want to talk about?
No, I just want to make the obligatory sign off by requesting our listeners to definitely, rate our podcast and comment on it, give us constructive feedback. Don't be too harsh, because, we really have kind of sensitive souls deep down. And do let us know how we can make this a better show for you. And yeah, with that, and also one more thing, as you all know, we do run a online news company by the name of Transmin. So do check out our website for interesting opinion pieces, articles, concise explainers by experts and professionals. So do check it out. Would highly recommend, obviously. And for that, this is Nikhil.
And this is Sharad.
Signing off.